Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Methane Mission Climate Week event. My name is Pamela Trevino. I am an NPA candidate in SIPA's Environmental Science and Policy program. A little bit more about myself. I am interested in advancing policy that addresses environmental challenges related to climate change with a focus on social justice. During my time in Colombia, my career interests have expanded to include impact investing, sustainable finance to be used as a leveraging tool for effective policymaking. So I'm very happy to be here today to discuss methane emissions. This is a topic that I've become particularly fond for since it is the main focus of my summer and fall capstone projects, which is a group project where we study a proposed legislation that has yet to be passed. We look at the pertaining environmental challenge of the bill that the bill tries to tackle. We propose solutions and then create an implementation plan. So my bill is the Enteric Methane Innovation Tools for Lower Emissions and Sustainable Stock Act of 2024, or the Emitless Act for short. And this is a bipartisan bill that aims to reduce methane emissions from cattle by advancing research and development of enteric methane to create innovative solutions that lower emissions while not adversely affecting the cow's health. So just for a bit of context, methane is produced in a cow's stomach during its digestion through a process called enteric fermentation. The methane in the stomach is then emitted into the atmosphere through burping, which this contributes to the greenhouse gas effect. So why are enteric methane emissions significant? Out of all the anthropogenic sources of methane, agricultural methane is the largest one. And within this category, enteric fermentation is the largest contributor. So this makes it a key source to be targeted. So in our workshop, we have looked at various approaches to solutions, including feed management techniques like specialized feed additives and manure management techniques such as anaerobic digesters. Although the project is not yet done, the biggest takeaway so far has been understanding that regardless of the approach that we take, our solution must not only reduce enteric methane emissions effectively, it should benefit the involved actors, in this case farmers, and also have a component that promotes economic growth. So an example of this can be seen through the innovative manure management approach of an anaerobic digester, which traps methane before it is released into the atmosphere. And this opens a potential for the production of biogas. So in this example, not only do we reduce methane emissions from the atmosphere, we have an opening to the renewable energy markets, and farmers have the potential for an additional revenue from biogas production. So we can take a similar approach to address methane emissions that are produced in landfills. With effective waste generation or waste management, we can effectively tackle this large source of anthropogenic methane emissions. Now, let's think a bit about plastics. When we tend to think about which they make up a large portion of the landfills. When we tend to think about the impacts of plastics to our planet, our mind might jump to ocean plastic pollution. And although a lot of plastics do end up in the oceans, unfortunately, plastics do contribute to many other environmental challenges, such as greenhouse gas emissions. From resource extraction to production, all the way to the end of their life cycles, plastics contribute to carbon dioxide emissions and methane emissions. So this is what we're here to talk about today. Global waste generation is projected to increase by 70% in the year 2050, so the need for sustainable action is urgent. Key actions like organic waste separation, landfill gas capturing, and the overall reduction of food waste has a potential to cut methane emissions by up to 36 million metric tons annually. So today, we will discuss how effective waste management, investment, and policy can not only reduce emissions, but also build resilience, enhance public health, and drive economic growth. Oh, completely forgot to change the slide. So these are gonna be the sessions that we're looking at today. The order did switch. We will be starting with, the plastic treaty. They changed it for me. So now I will pass the mic to my colleague, Sarah Harris, who will be presenting the panelists for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela, for wonderfully summarizing some of the work that our cohort is up to. Hello everyone, I'm Sara, and I'm currently a student at the MPA in Environmental Science and Policy program, the same as Pamela. With this, I'm happy to introduce you all to the first session of the event, which is Global Policy and Negotiation on Plastic Treaty Opportunities. Um, we have, uh, so just to give some background, the United Nations is currently negotiating a global treaty aimed at tackling plastic pollution at every stage of its life cycle, from design and production to disposal. This treaty presents a significant opportunity for all of us to manage and reduce our plastic waste. In this panel, we will discuss the relation of methane and plastics, the importance of this negotiation, and the importance of having the voice of waste pickers, who are the principal actors in reclaiming waste for the recycling industry. So we have with us Gonzalo Munoz, a UN climate change high-level champion from the COP25 presidency, appointed by the Chilean presidency in 2019. From that position, he co-led with Miguel Topping the global campaigns Race to Zero, Race to Resilience, and GFANS. He's also the co-founder and leader at Ambition Loop. Previously, he founded and led Tricyclos and co-founded B Corp's platform, Manuya and Polkara Winery. So, welcome. We also have Barbara, co-founder and co-executive director for Ground Score Association, a waste picker organization in Portland, Oregon. She is a representative in the International Alliance of Waste Pickers and engages with various local, national, and international organizations. She is a second-generation waste picker herself. Barbara, please. And our third panelist here is Christian, who joined the World Economic Forum's Global Plastic Action Partnership team in 2020 and currently leads the initiative's global work streams. He has been with the World Economic Forum for nearly 10 years, leading a diversity of partner accounts and multi-stakeholder projects promoting sustainable consumption and production. We look forward to having an engaging discussion.
Thanks so much. Thanks to Columbia University and of course to Global Methane Hub and Ambition Group for hosting us here today. As it was presented, my name is Gonzalo Munoz. I started with some friends 15 years ago a recycling and circular economy, B Corp, in Chile, operating nowadays in several countries in Latin America, and with the idea of tackling some of the issues related to inorganic waste, mostly packaging, and with a very strong focus on supporting the work of waste pickers in our region. We have been collaborating with the Alliance before its creation, like for many, many years with Soledad Bella, and it's great to be here with Barbara. On understanding that when it comes to waste, there are either errors of design, where we say that waste is nothing but an error of design, but also logistical problems, right? So where we say that waste pickers, they understand very well what is in a black bag of waste. They know about the logistics that are in there, the value, the economic value. They know about chemistry. They know about physical elements. They know a lot about what is in there. And at the end, they pick mostly anything and only the thing that they can transport and sell. But that doesn't mean that they know, okay, those other elements sometimes are recyclable, but doesn't worth doing certain effort due to sometimes the lack of infrastructure. So we try to create a different infrastructure that will allow waste pickers to, at the end, help recycle more and more materials, up to 35 different types of materials, regardless of the final negative or positive residual value that is on it, but with the idea of waste pickers receiving a payment for the service that they provide. Well, why am I telling you all of this? Because part of what happened during those 15 years of talking about inorganic waste, I realized that if I had a magic wand and be capable of converting every single household in the world by just one thing, I would ask everyone to just sort organics from inorganics. And the reason of that is because organic is 50% of what is in a waste in general, right? It can go from 30 or 40 to 60 depending on the region, the country, the characteristics of both, of course, in many places. Either because you are vegetarian or you live in an urban area versus a rural area, it can vary. But at the end, organic waste represents approximately half of the, let's say, waste problem. And it's incredible that, I mean, if you were a mayor, you would say, okay, I'm just going to do one thing. I'm going to ask everyone to just segregate that. We will, by separating it, we will allow not only the organic waste, as Pamela was saying, create a huge of an opportunity when it comes to transforming that into energy or into soil, even into materials. And nowadays we're talking about the importance of, for example, sustainable fuels. All of that potential only happens, of course, if you segregate that and develop a proper type of organic stream. And on the other side, what will happen is that waste pickers will have a much, let's say, easy role and definitely will dignify the role much more. I don't know if any of you have merged into waste when it's combined, right? I remember John, this amazing Kenyan waste picker, saying when we approach waste, it's mostly organic and plastic combined, right? That's mostly what we see there. So why am I referring to all of this? First, because it's a no-brainer. And it's absurd that it's not mandatory. We will rapidly, on one side, reduce half of the problem and facilitate the solution of both, even potentially create positive financial streams. We have tested this in not only, let's say, more wealthy municipalities, but sometimes in some very poor municipalities in the global south that are doing this approach. Almost some of them because they don't have enough money to manage waste combined. So as a solution for poor municipalities, one of the things they do is that they immediately operate the organic separated from the inorganic. So one of the magic of this, and why I am saying that if I had a wand, I would just ask everyone in the world to segregate organic from inorganic, is because it's probably one of the only topics that touches the four major discussions that we're having globally. It touches the climate agenda because it reduces methane. Pamela explained very much about the urgency on reducing methane. It's a low-hanging fruit of the system. It's a powerful gas, 80 times CO2, but has a short life in the atmosphere. If we reduce methane emissions in the three sectors that she was referring to, fossil fuels, food production, and waste management, we will be putting the world on track to the Paris Agreement. So when it comes to climate, it's urgent to work the organics, segregate it, and reduce those emissions. When it comes to biodiversity, operating organics properly will definitely halt the biodiversity loss and will increment our capacity of regenerating biodiversity in the soils all around the world. When it comes to the desertification treaty, of course, it's all about soil health and stopping land degradation and starting land regeneration. And again, it's all about how do we reintegrate those organic elements back into the soil. And then the one surprising is about the plastic treaty. As I say, if we put the element of segregating organic from inorganics in the treaty, and potentially as something that could be discussed in a long term through the COP process, once the treaty is signed, we will immediately allow, again, for creating a stream, the organic one, that can potentially finance itself, so we will reduce the financial burden of waste in a huge amount. And on the other side, we will not only facilitate a lot of the management of the inorganic part, we will help the waste pickers to play their role. It's fascinating to see how waste pickers are one of the most important forces. I know Barbara will talk about is saying, yes, we want to be on board. Even though probably very few people will recognize their capacity on helping directly into the organic part of waste. They are the most important labor force around the world, helping on solving organic waste management in general around the world. But also, if they're not on board, then we're a problem and we will be failing on using their amazing capacity. But then including the possibility of that organic stream creating a possibility for certain compostable plastics that need to replace some non-recyclable plastics, some plastics that are a huge problem, and we know that some of them can be converted into compostable ones, and sometimes they do not convert because there is no stream for ensuring that those plastics will be composted, right? So even there is a possibility by creating the stream is pulling for the huge capacity of several types of compostable polymers to have their own truck, and therefore helping replace and redesign polymers of concerns and move away from some chemicals and additives of concern that we know about, and many, many multi-layers and plastics that we know are fossil fuel based and have no way to get recycled and solved. So I'm here also talking about the work that we're doing with the Global Methane Hub and Ambition Loop on positioning just that topic into the treaty around either organic versus inorganic, or just mentioning the importance of the methane agenda so we can work it on during the rest of the process. Thank you very much.
My name is Barbara Weber, and I'm from Portland, Oregon. So I'm a part of the International Alliance representing North America. I'm a second generation waste picker, so that means that my dad was a waste picker. I came into, here in the United States for context most of the time. So in Oregon, there's what they call an EPR scheme where we return bottles and cans, plastic bottles and cans for a living. And it's been around since I was born, so 1971. When I got involved with the plastics treaty negotiation, I started learning about what waste picking was looking like around the world. Now, I had some sense of it because I had already started working with the International Alliance through my organization, Ground Score Association. But the learning curve for me was immense, coming from coming from the United States. Waste management is done in a very different way. So I had to really lean on my friends from South America, from Africa, from Asia, to really talk about the reality of what waste pickers' jobs are that are not here in the US or in Europe. So when it comes to talking about anything that comes to waste, I will say that there's 34 million waste pickers around the world, right? And this is an absolute provable term that they have recycled over 60% of the plastic worldwide. So just let that sink in a little bit. Not that there's been a whole lot of plastic recycled, but they've recycled over 60% of that. So you have a group of people that are all over the planet that come from very, very poor circumstances, that are still living in somewhat very horrible conditions, even here in the US and in Europe as well. One thing that unites us is we all come from extreme poverty. When I started my organization, I was sleeping outside in a tent, but I wanted to change the world. I wanted to have dignity in the type of work that we were doing. One thing that we all fight for as waste pickers is recognition, right? That's been our number one thing from UNA 5 all the way up through the plastics treaty, is that the first thing we want to start with is we want to be recognized as workers. We want to be recognized as as contributing to the major part of why the planet is as healthy as it is. What I'm here during, why I'm here during Climate Week is I want to build these bridges. We're the experts in the materials where our hands are in it. So we're the best one to start the process of sorting. How it goes is that there's only a small portion of the waste that we get money from, that's worth value, and we're trying to change that. But then there's a big portion of it that we take care of that we don't get any income for. So because you have a big pile of garbage, you have to get through that to get the valuables, right? So there's a process. I don't know how many people here has been to a dump site, but a dump site is when the first time that I experienced that was I went to Dandora dump site in Nairobi, and was overwhelmed by, because in the United States landfills are they have, they release the gases. It's engineered. It's not like you can't smell that from most of the city, right? So there's a very much a different reality in various places. But what did I learn while I was there? First of all, they're taking care of things that we take for granted. We honestly take for granted. Talking about inorganic waste, one thing that I think waste pickers are really, really good at, and I can show you video after video. In India, they do doorstep collection in like 8,000 households in some places. What they do is they do education on inorganic waste, on how to rinse containers. They give examples of, this is what you do with inorganic waste, this is how you sort the plastic. So they're teaching households. These are waste pickers teaching entire huge communities on how to properly segregate their own waste at the doorstep, which I think is an amazing process, right? And similarly, we also in Ground Score Association, we work with people that we provide a trash service or waste management services to people who are suffering extreme poverty. And we sort that waste too. We divert at least 25% of everything that we collect. We keep that from going to landfill. We separate the inorganic, the food, the cardboard, the plastic, the metal, all the wood. It goes into these things. They have lots of technology up front from what I've discovered being in the plastics treaty, that a lot of design has gone into how these machines that will tell you the grade of plastic. Well, I can guarantee you, any waste picker that's been around, that especially, they can look at a piece of plastic, even if it's a very small piece, and they can tell you exactly what grade of plastic it is. It's pretty amazing, And the organization, of the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, there's 460,000 waste pickers that are in my union. I sit on the executive council of that. We just, went through the process of our Congress and elected our leaders to go, so we're about to become our own thing, which is super exciting. And also too, we're growing. We're trying to organize with other, trying to get waste pickers on the ground. Even in the U.S., people, they don't even know they're waste pickers. So, it's about an education of that. I think that there's a lot of hope in like, when you think about methane and the inorganic waste, there's a lot of, this could be a real financial mechanism. There's a lot of funding coming at us about like how even in the U.S. on waste prevention, which is this inorganic waste that you're talking about, or composting. Some places in Africa were the first of their kind to start composting with the little bugs and the flies. Is quite something. In Dandora, they have buildings set up to process this. So, people from, you don't need a huge education. This is stuff that they've taught their children, or we've been taught since we were kids. Also, even into reuse or reuse. When you're poor, you reuse everything, even if it's not supposed to be reusable. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here today.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Christian Kaufholz, and I'm with the Global Plastic Action Partnership of the World Economic Forum. I also want to thank in particular Columbia University and Ambition Loop for having us and for the event. I think what we get excited about and what this also reflects this conversation precisely is sort of the connection points and systemic issues that relate to the broader environmental agenda and also the social and economic pieces that are intrinsically linked to those environmental challenges, and we should often lead also with the human-centric and the socioeconomic challenges and opportunities that lie sort of within these environmental topics. I'm going to talk a little bit maybe about what we do at the Global Plastic Action Partnership in regard to those interconnections and the work we do. So what we do at the global level is bringing stakeholders together, just like here today, between different sectors, which includes government, business, and civil society, and academia, to discuss broader challenges. In the case of plastics currently, the Global Plastics Treaty is a great backdrop to build momentum for, of course, the plastic pollution agenda in and of itself, but then also use it, I think, as almost like a door opener to the broader socioeconomic challenges, the injustices, the just transition opportunity, but also the broader environmental agenda, which plastics links into. And so this week here in New York, of course, we had a lot of opportunities to do just that, but we continue to do that also, for example, now as we move to the supposedly final negotiation round for the Global Plastic Treaty in Korea later this year. But equally importantly and most sort of closely, I think, relevant for this conversation, the Global Plastic Action Partnership works with partners locally now in 19 countries in the Global South to support multi-stakeholder platforms where government, business, civil society come together at the national and local level to build national approaches or subnational approaches as well to tackling plastic pollution. So we started in 2018-19 and are now, as I said, in 19 countries across Latin America, Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. And the idea is that these platforms locally are owned by the stakeholders and are also inclusive and follow sort of an evidence-based principle, meaning that also the stakeholders rally around sort of a shared understanding of what the situation is in the country and what needs to happen to address the plastic pollution issue. And at the table from the get-go, all the key stakeholders, including the informal sector, are part of the conversation. At the country level, we, I think, work in two different ways, or these national partnerships work in two different ways. The first is we support through also grant funding, in our case from the UK government, with direct support for the informal waste picker communities. And for example, in Colombia, we work with, or through an organization called EcoWorks, which has a project called the Plastic Free Pacific project, and it's really working with very remote and rural communities on the Pacific coast to address some of the issues that Barbara and Gonzalo already touched on. And it's a lot about the local partners building on capacity, training, skills, education, and also bringing the community leadership into the waste management conversations and really empowering a different sort of awareness and engagement in this important space. Every country or every community has its own focus or priorities, In Rio, for example, there's a project where we work with the Instituto de Direito Colectivo, which focuses much more on building local cooperatives and associations and helping them with sort of formalizing those cooperatives and the legal and administrative challenges to do that. So one avenue, as I said, is sort of this direct support, but I think the second area, which is even more exciting, is to embed this thinking in the social and economic dimensions of the plastic pollution issue into the national platforms from the get-go. And here we, when we do what we call national baseline assessments, meaning measuring plastics flows in the country, understanding where the leakage is, where the challenges are, we accompany that through a social context assessment, which precisely focuses on the inequalities, the existing inequalities in the plastic value chain, and not only how different communities are disproportionately affected by the pollution, but also bringing their solutions to the forefront, because they're also best equipped to actually bring the solutions to the table. And so, for example, in Ghana, which was the first country where we rolled out such a social context assessment, the analysis, which is done with the stakeholders, right? It's a participatory assessment. It's not just a sort of one organization coming in and doing research. But what that revealed is that in 6 regions in Ghana, they found that 15% of waste pickers were children between the age of 5 and 12 years old. And that, of course, then informed very much the country's plastic action roadmap that it developed, but it also made its way into the Department of Social Welfare and putting in place monitoring systems and action specifically to integrate these child protection issues into their policies and initiatives. So those are just some examples, but since we now have the network of countries that are part of this initiative, we also increasingly start bringing them together to learn from each other, so that countries don't reinvent the wheel, but can exchange knowledge and best practice, but also bring that perspective into then the global conversations, including around the Global Plastics Treaty, because I think ultimately, whatever happens at the global level, the realities are on the ground, the implementation will be on the ground at the country level, and even more importantly at the local level. And I think these dimensions around the social and socioeconomic pieces need to be really embedded in any national action plans or national implementation plans that will come out of the global agreement. So yeah, maybe I'll stop there, but yeah, looking forward to the discussion and connecting the dots with all these important issues. Thank you.
So if I may, I would like to ask the two of you, because Barbara, of course, as you mentioned, the waste picker role mostly has been recognized in the importance of segregating and obtaining value from carton board, let's say PET, aluminum cans, in some places, some glass, whatever it's like. But it's mostly around inorganic historically, right? And we're seeing now the Alliance absolutely engaged and committed to the plan of working also on organic waste, right? And the same thing with GPAP. GPAP was developed towards the logic of helping to solve the problem of plastic waste in general, and now it's also analyzing when it comes to the methane agenda and the waste management. It's all about organic. So I was wondering if the two of you can share how that conversation evolved internally, where it is, and potentially what comes next in that perspective, specifically into the organic part of the waste.
Well, I feel like we're at all of the waste is always a conversation. Like when waste pickers get together, it is the first thing, like the kinds of materials we're touching, what are we doing with the materials? What are the ideas of making it better? You know, we're a very creative bunch of people. And so I kind of look at, I see as right now as an exchange, because I don't know as much about this issue as my comrades in other places of the world. So I really depend on them. But I can create if they create a program over here that starts something, then we can we repeat that, right? It's like rinse and repeat. We find something that works, and how we see it is that, you know, we honestly don't want our children to be, we don't want to see children in dump sites. We don't want to see people, we don't want to see kids waste picking. They should be in school. They should be looking to do something else with their life. That's our goal. It's in one of our Congress, it's one of the things that we voted on. It was to you know, we want to end child labor. So just want to mention that because it's a definitely important aspect of our work. I see as being at a pivotal point of being able to hear, and also, you know, we're looking for universal cards of formality. Like, my organization is formal, but I'm one of the only organizations that is, like, we have 60 employees. I'm an employee, you know, so I'm no longer informal. We want to see a just transition from that. And some of that is I see is like entrepreneurial stuff, you know, like I have a friend of mine in India, you know, she's a business owner of 4 different businesses in India, and she can't read or write, but a lot of it has to do with like inorganic waste or dry waste, or they're recycling, you know, textiles into a rate that is incomprehensible to us. They're amazing. So all of these intersections here, I think, comes as at an opportunity. So I mean, I have to kind of say that we're at the beginning of figuring out where that is in life. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think specifically the nexus to organic waste and from a plastics pollution perspective, I think that nexus is gaining more and more importance in our conversations. I think, first of all, one of the key challenges that we have in trying to build a circular economy for plastics specifically is the contamination and the lack of quality and reliable sources of feedstock for then producing plastics from recycled content. And so the separation from organic and inorganic, of course, is one of the biggest challenges, and therefore also one of the biggest opportunities to make that happen. Barbara mentioned 60% of waste that is recycled goes through the hands of the informal sector, and I think that is then obviously the key starting point for this opportunity. So just from an operational technical perspective, this is a key requirement to you know, make a circular economy of plastics work. The second reason why we're looking at this nexus and it's increasingly becoming top of mind is that when we think about especially how developing countries are struggling with addressing multiple environmental challenges and finding also the capacity, both the human capacity in terms of number of people in government or elsewhere working on those challenges, but also the financial resource gap, right, that exists to tackle these challenges. We need to start connecting different agendas and also different obligations now countries increasingly have under multiple agreements or frameworks, so that you can sort of kill multiple birds with one stone. And I've been asked not to use that expression in environmental circles, so I need to find a new one. But so how do we create the synergies, right, between the climate agenda and the plastics agenda as an example?
You can potentially recycle many plastics with just one hand, something like that.
Yeah. Exactly, and how do we sort of also get more bang for the buck in terms of investments that a country puts towards it's this one. That a country puts towards, for example, its climate mitigation targets. How can the same resource address plastic pollution or vice versa? And I think with limited capacity in the developing world, understanding how you can really maximize your impact with limited resources.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
much for this engaging session and exploring the nexus between plastics and organics, and also diving deeper into how actually things work on the ground, like with examples from Dandora and India. Like I personally have had the chance to see so many startups come up in this space in India and actually changing the livelihoods of practitioners. So thank you so much. I would like to open the floor for any Q&A. We already received a lot of Q&A even before the session started, but would like to take it from the audience if there's any. Yeah, Mike?
I think you can hear me. Is that okay? Oh, okay. Hello, thank you so much. My name is Marisa, and I direct a global zero waste program. So I'm just everything you're saying, my heart is beating faster and faster. I just returned from the International Zero Waste Cities Conference in Tanzania and the Environmental Justice and Methane Summit. And I feel so privileged to work with the very grassroots organizations that I work with around waste picker inclusion and environmental justice in organic waste management. And at the same time, I was horrified to see that only 1% of methane abatement finance goes to zero waste and community-led solutions, and 94% goes to incineration. And especially in the global south, where there's so much pressure for waste infrastructure, I'm just wondering about your thoughts on how to redirect that money to go to environmentally just and successful community-led organic waste management. For example, in Tanzania, they have 94 to 98% compliance of segregation at source, and all of that was through relationship building and community building. And so even though there are so many examples of success, only 1% of, and this figure was from the Climate Policy Initiative, CPI. I hope I got that correct. And so I'm just wondering, how do we redirect this money? And also, how do we collaborate and align? Because I still think there's so many silos of different people working in organics waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. So if I may ask the two of you, first, Barbara, would be interesting for the audience to learn about what's the position from the waste pickers around incineration and waste to energy.
We don't agree we work very much with Gaia, and we don't believe in incineration at all. Okay, no chemical recycling. Okay, and we have a very strong, we want to save the environment, and those things are very much harming the environment. Just from a personal level, when we were in Paris for the plastics treaty negotiations, I struggled to breathe. I woke up in the morning to do my morning prayer, and I'm looking outside, and I see just a black line across the sky and the horizon. And I found out that they incinerate a bunch of their waste, right? And that was like, because you could see it in the air. I mean, it was almost worse than like Los Angeles, which is pretty bad when it comes to pollution. So, I just kind of think about it in that framework. We have very strong opinions on especially waste incineration. When the incinerator comes, it takes away the work and the livelihood of the waste pickers that are there. And so we've just recently had demonstrations in Cape Town against an incineration. And when there's any time that there's a part of our organization in a country where they're trying to, we organize with partners like Gaia, like other organizations, to help to help fight those.
Thank you. So Christian, what's your perspective on how to finance a different track rather than incineration?
Yeah, just maybe to also echo, I think, where we said, and I'm speaking more from the plastics side of things, incineration is very, very low in the waste hierarchy, and we should definitely first reuse and then recycle, and only things that are left at the end consider incineration. I think the other reflection I just had is that incineration in the plastics waste space is actually a very, very prevalent phenomenon also in the developed world, including Europe and Japan. I think, for the public has also for a long time believed that what actually is incineration counts as recycling, and it's not, right? So I think that even in the developed world, has been in recent years an aha moment in the sense of how little is actually being recycled in practice. But on the financing question specifically, I think that a lot of it has to do with the economics that just don't work at the systems level. And in the plastics space, again, I think the fact that we have subsidies that make virgin plastic production very, very cheap make it extremely difficult to invest viably into recycled plastics and circular solutions. And so I think that there are bigger economic questions that need to be solved to also really set the overall economic framework in a way that actually makes recycled plastic more viable. So incineration, unfortunately, is sort of the unintended consequence maybe of the fact that the linear model is being subsidized through subsidies currently.
Just the last question, and then we'll have a break. Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Ira. I'm from Climate Policy Initiative. So I just met Marisa a few days ago, and thank you for mentioning our numbers so that I don't have to mention them again. So yes, only 1% of finance flows into methane abatement finance goes to organic waste management, and this is a problem because organic waste poses 20% of methane emissions in all the sectors. But what is really interesting is that even though investments are, the investment for organic waste management is actually low compared to all the climate benefits that it can produce compared to renewable energy or low-cost transport. But the heavy part is actually the operational cost. The operational cost of organic waste management is the part that is the high part. So what we have been in discussion, especially yesterday, I have just moderated a panel on lowering organic waste management from the financing part, and we have actually discussed that the cost of inaction is actually higher, much higher. So this is the part that we need to emphasize more. The cost of inaction, there will be costs on the health, on environment, on social. So this is things that jurisdictions or governments need to take into account and integrate policies like waste management policies into also health and environment and social policies.
Just to reflect, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's also, I think, reflective of the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of the agendas and the budgets also in governments are siloed. And so the benefits that accrue to the health ministry or the health care system are not directly accounted for in the budgets of the waste management or other ministries. And I think that it requires a lot of leadership at the national level or cross-ministry collaboration to actually do the numbers and have a vision that is much more holistic. But I think it's a big problem to break through that. But yeah, that's absolutely a great reflection.
Thank you. And one more quick question.
Thank you. I make the question very quick. So Andre Vrieman from Dutch Energy Solutions from Europe. So what could another actor do, the plastic producers? We always put maybe that's a part of the problem. How could he be part of the solution?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, of course, the plastic producing industry has a lot of expertise around the materials, the chemicals, additives that are part of the many, many, many products that have very different functionalities and requirements in the market, and how can that expertise be leveraged to upstream design materials and products in a way that actually downstream they are recyclable, not only in practice, but also then, not only technically, but then also economically. I think there's, for example, a lot of opportunity to, in many applications, move towards more simplified monomaterial formats for products, because a lot of the challenges that a lot of products have multiple layers and multiple materials built into them, and which make it then impossible or economically very difficult to and costly to separate and recycle. So I think that the industry has a huge opportunity and responsibility to think upstream around design and work with downstream partners in the consumer packaging space, for example, then the brands and the recyclers to find design criteria that actually then allow that to happen. And the Global Plastics Treaty is an opportunity to actually globally agree on some of those applications that are problematic or avoidable, where a more better design, more circular design could help solve that problem. Obviously, there's also a lot of discussion around production limits and caps, and of course, the producers have a commercial interest in producing plastics or inputs for plastic production. So, but again, if there's a level playing field that a global agreement can set, at least, companies can then feel that they're at a level playing field with their competitors to then abide by those restrictions. But I think politically, it's very difficult to get to those types of agreements, just because a lot of governments are, of course, also looking at the footprint of their plastic production in country, and then jobs are related to that, exports, revenues, and so politically, of course, we see a huge polarization in the negotiations, because in some countries it's just very difficult to make that a political reality.
Barbara, would you like to add something?
I didn't quite hear his question, so I'm going to...
No, but just meant you're talking to the plastic industry. What would you like the plastic industry to hear from the waste speakers?
I think that there needs to be a reduction. Like you said, it's a very political issue. We have, in our mind, we want to do away with anything that cannot be recycled, right? And we mean it has to be able to be mechanically recycled. So at least mechanically recycled. So single layer plastic, all that stuff goes away. Now I look at, I think that, we look at extended producer responsibility. There's ways for producers to engage and help finance, different design, like you said, different designs, different mechanisms of how to, I think it's just it's going to have to be a collaborative effort, and also to remember the waste pickers, because there's a lot of times where producers, even in the United States, we're funded by part of our recycling depot is funded by producers, right? But we only operate 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, right? And we're the only one in this area that's funded this way. Like you said, 1%. So recognizing that waste pickers contribute is a big one, and how, in working with the various organizations there and waste picker organizations to come up with ways to, some ways to collaborate together in responsible ways, right? And that's the key, responsible ways, right? So I'm representing a lot of different waste pickers, and I'm not the one that talks specifically or interconnects these things, other than the EPR schemes that we are currently dealing with in the U.S. Thank you.
So if I can resume, and I can tell you when I'm talking to the plastic industry, what I'm telling them. First, I've witnessed firsthand for 20 more years how reluctant in general. I'm generalizing, and every time that you generalize, there's an unfairness there. But I'm generalizing by saying that the plastic industry is being reluctant to be more proactive, and much more being resistant to change, and the the speech that we still hearing from the plastic industry is like, oh, it's so important, our society would not work. And we know it. Of course, we're all dressed with plastic, we're living in plastic, we're transporting in plastic, we're communicating through plastic. Our medicine would not be the one we have with plastic, we know that. And it's so important to recognize that there's so many negative externalities of the plastic industry that we have been just not taking care of. And now the problem is so massive that we are now in a kind of urgency situation. And the alarm sounded with the resolution in 2022, and my perception is that the plastic industry went like, nah, that's not serious. And in the last year, they have come like, holy crap, this is serious, right? And reacting rapidly. Who signed the resolution from my country? It's like, it's incredible the reaction that they're having. Like, they didn't imagine that this was coming.
Yeah.
When it was like a tsunami coming over there, yeah, but it might never come, you know, like it's such an insane reality. And of course, it's much related to the petrochemical sector in general, and we can compare it to the same thing when it comes to climate. So unfortunately, we're now in the final moment when we need to reach an agreement. And of course, we're seeing a lot of resistance from the general petrochemical industry and the plastic community trying for this not to happen, right? It will happen. So as it will happen, first try to find what are your levels of sustainable production. The world, sure, we need plastic, but we need in a sustainable way, right? So internally, in your company, in your organization, in your sector, in your country, find out what is unnecessary plastic. There's so much, right? Yeah. We know it. Reduce that. Second, there is a huge discussion that will be very long, probably infinite, about the chemicals of concern. Mm-hmm. The individual that designed this pen was considering like about the pen to be strong enough to carry the ink, for me to close it and open it, for me to write properly. But I am 100% sure that that person, without no bad intention, never thought about the possibility of all the additives that are here in this cup. If ever this cup goes into the environment and fragmented into nanoparticles and goes into the bloodstream and potentially to the brain of an individual, what happens there? No one has ever done that with the tens of thousands of chemicals that are now in our clothes, in our packaging, in our buildings, in our tires that we're breathing all the time. No one has ever, and I'm not blaming like, oh, and you're mean and evil because of that. No, that was a blind spot, and now it's no longer a blind spot. And unfortunately, that's there, and we have to realize and recognize that is massive as a problem, and that will not go away because we don't like it, because it's too complex. Quite the opposite. Because it's complex, if we do not tackle it, it will get only more complex. So the situation that we have to confront, and that's an incredible opportunity for talent and for people around the world, is to check on chemicals of concern. Hopefully in the treaty we will be capable of banning or removing at least a group of it, and have then a work stream for keep on replacing. And we're not saying then, no, close everything, we will back to the caverns. No, it's about let's find out, as we have done incredible innovations for centuries as humans. Okay, it's a time for example, check all the chemicals of concerns and it's chemical of concern in a matrix with the application. So certain chemical in a certain application might be not of concern, right? So it depends on which is the application. We have to be smart on that. Then design for recyclability, like everything that Christian was saying, like check everything that you're doing and be sure that that product, that element, that polymer that you're putting into the market has a really, really high probability of getting recycled. So one thing is I'm designing for recyclability, but then let me commit through EPR, to the work of waste speakers, for that to get recycled, right? So those two words mean a lot. One thing is, yeah, this is recyclable in a lab in Minnesota, and other thing is it can be recycled in New Delhi. Then, of course, connect and commit to EPR, connect and commit to reuse and refill, and the topic that we're talking about today. If I were in the plastic industry, I would say I will immediately commit to organic waste streams. That will simplify the work a lot. You are being charged by the huge waste problem, whereas half of it is somehow, let's say, others' problem, but others' opportunity, or let's say, and we can coordinate something that will help us evolve with those streams separately. And finally, learn from the waste pickers. Bring a waste picker to your board. They have so much to teach.
As all the panelists would agree, there's a tremendous opportunity in the waste sector, and in the next session, we are going to be exploring exactly that. We'll have a panel on innovative solutions from industry leaders that are transforming waste management into an opportunity. So we'll have a quick 5-minute break, and please feel free to look at the screens. We are capturing some of the keywords and the stories from this amazing session we had. And yeah, please, thank you.